August 23rd, 2023 meeting of the Southampton Town Conservation Board. In accordance with the town board's adoption of local law number 14 of 2022, the board's meetings are being held both in person at Town Hall and via video conference through Zoom webinar. The link to participate in this meeting via video conference can be found on the town's website at the town clerk's agendas and meetings portal. You can also watch the live stream video and submit written comments for the public record through the town website. If you are attending via Zoom and wish to speak during this meeting, then please click the raised hand icon. As a reminder to all applicants, agents, and members of the public who wish to speak at the meeting, please state your name and hamlet of residence for the record. Thank you. I invite everyone to rise for the salute to the flag.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us. Do we have a quorum to approve the July 26th minutes of the meeting?
Well, I have to abstain. I believe that one I was not present at.
Okay, and,
No.
all
We
right.
can't approve it yet.
Oh, carryover again, huh?
Yeah, how about August 9th?
I can approve those.
And you were here.
I
you were
was here.
All right, is there a motion to approve the minutes of August 9th?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
Public hearings, A 022028 Denise Sokolich, and this hearing was misnoticed. There's no action that we can take on this. A 022056 Alexandra C. Fraden and family with trustees. And this is this applicant requests an adjournment to November 1st, 2023. Is there anyone in the public who would speak to this application?
Move to adjourn to November 1st.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 023035 Anthony Prudenti.
This is a new public hearing. We do have affidavits of posting and mailing. The board has jurisdiction to open the hearing.
Thank you.
You want to give me the affidavit?
For the original.
The affidavit, okay. I thought you had, I'm sorry. Thank you. Anything new tonight, Daphne?
I do have a few things, nothing really new.
Okay, just don't want to hand out stuff if you're handing in other stuff.
It's already stamped.
Okay, thank you.
Those are some additional copies of the photos in the file. This is a
Thank you.
relevant plan and copies of a prior approval.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you.
Okay.
Do you need these, Marty? Do you need any?
I'm good, thanks.
Daphne Vaughn, Surfside Environmental Planning, for the landowner Anthony Prudenti, who is also here with me tonight. Excuse me. The proposed project is located at 20 East Hyanna Road in Hampton Bays and fronts on the tidal wetlands associated with Tiana Bay. The proposed project is comprised of partial reconstruction of an existing 1.5-story residence to make it a full 2 stories, located at its closest point 116 feet to the wetland boundary, as well as construction of a new 1- and 2-story addition with a footprint of 1,900 square feet on the landward side of the residence, which includes a garage with a rec room above it, as well as an entryway and a mudroom that will be located 137 feet from the wetland boundary. There's also a new porch proposed on the landward side of the residence, as well as resurfacing of the existing decking on the seaward side of the residence, with a new roofed portion over the existing deck and a second floor deck above that. The existing spa will be replaced in kind on the resurfaced decking. And the new existing sanitary will be removed on the seaward side of the residence with a new IA OWTS septic on the landward side of the residence at 150 feet from the wetlands at its closest point. A new reconfigured gravel and partial paver parking areas are shown, located on the landward side of the residence, along with proper drainage for the upgraded residence, spa, and a proposed swimming pool. The new proposed 392 square foot swimming pool is shown on the seaward side of the residence, behind that proposed addition that I mentioned earlier, within a surrounding retaining wall with a maximum height of 5 feet on the seaward side, which will contain approximately 30 cubic yards of excavated fill material from the site for its installation. The pool will be surrounded by approximately 800 square feet of new deck and patio and access steps from the existing decking. The closest wetland setbacks of the pool is 108 feet from the wetland boundary. The deck is 105 feet from the wetland boundary, and the retaining wall is 104 feet from the wetland boundary. This project is largely in keeping with a permit CB 20013 that was issued February 27th, 2020, which was due to expire January 8th, 2023, but was granted an automatic 6-month extension due to COVID, and was valid until July 8th of this year. The swimming pool that was granted in that prior permit was the exact same size as the one that's currently before you, and proposed at a 120-foot wetland setback in a location perpendicular to the existing residence, thus the survey that I submitted tonight. The former pool was proposed within a retaining wall also at a height of approximately 3 feet above the existing grade, with a wall located 115 feet from the wetland boundary, also with approximately 30 cubic yards of excavated soils proposed as backfill. The former owner never got to complete this project due to him suddenly passing away during the pandemic very early on. So the property was sold in June of 2021 to Mr. Prudenti for development of the current project. So this application was filed on June 14th while the former permit was still valid. We chose not to transfer that permit, renew it, and modify it, as it would not be cost effective to my client with the fees for only 1 year of an additional valid permit versus filing a new application to seek 3 additional years for a similar project. The preliminary advisory report for the project was dated July 5th, 2023, also while the permit was still valid. And Mr. Shea really had no issues with the project in general, except for the proposed retaining wall and fill surrounding the swimming pool. The swimming pool that is proposed is similar to the former approval in that it is landward of the limit of moderate wave action. It's still located within the FEMA flood zone, just maybe a little more so than the former approval. Because it's located partially within a flood zone, or entirely in this case, the building department will require an engineer's sign-off on the construction of the pool, and that's true with any swimming pool that's even located, a foot into a flood zone. There was a covenant filed by the former owner on the property per the buffer that was sketched in 2019 for the preliminary advisory report at that time by Mr. Shea, which is still what is shown on the survey right now. And that covenant, it was submitted as part of our package. So a planting plan was submitted and approved back in 2020 for the former owner. My client would like to use that former planting plan if possible. If we just need to change names on it, we can certainly do that. And part of the mitigation for the project that was required is the adjacent property to the north is town-owned land that was formerly associated with this residence that was sold by a few owners ago to the town. There's an asphalt driveway that's circular that you can see in that aerial up there that was required as mitigation for the 2019 permit to be removed. So that mitigation would still stand for this project, and that would be removed from that town property and replanted. And that planting was part of the planting plan that was approved in the former permit. Additionally, there is an existing storage shed you can see in the aerial that was also required to be relocated. We are depicting that on the survey. Right now it's down here. And we're showing it being relocated over here outside of the buffer at a setback of about 69 feet from the wetland boundary, which is similar to where it was shown on the prior approval. All of the new components of construction are located 100 feet or more from the wetland boundary, as is customary and required per Chapter 325. And I just want to note that there was no public hearing required for the original permit on this project.
Could I just ask for a little history on the property? How long has Mr. Prudenti owned the property?
Since 2021. June.
2021.
Yes.
So he would have no knowledge of Sandy and the effect it had on the shoreline?
I don't know that there was any effect to the residents from Sandy. My former client, Mr. McBreen, who owned the property prior to Mr. Prudenti, purchased it, he only owned it for a couple of years, not even very long. And he had bought it. It had some mold damage, to my knowledge, in the walls. I don't know that that was from Sandy, because there was a tenant apparently illegally living in the basement that no one's living in the house right now. There were some code enforcement issues that he was dealing with at that time in 2019, to my knowledge. The house has been vacant for quite some time, at least on the upper floors, to my knowledge. But that's all that I know.
Thank you, Daphne.
You're welcome.
Good evening, Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. As mentioned by the applicant, there is a preliminary advisory report on file dated July 5, 2023. As alluded to, this property is located within an area that's highly vulnerable to flooding, as evidenced by the mapping of the FEMA flood zones, the expansive wetlands and lowlands on the property, and the extent of flooding that routinely occurs along the west side of East Yana Road in Hampton Bays. Most of the homes on East Yana Road are set pretty far back. In the case of this home, it's on a little bit higher ground. Notwithstanding the elevation of the dwellings, the lowland between these homes and Tiana Bay is often flooded. This was an area where there was extensive flooding during Superstorm Sandy, and oftentimes during nor'easters. For that reason, the Tiana Bay area became a focus area for the town with regards to land preservation, and in addition to the abutting protected lands, we're continuing to buy much land in the area, not only in the interest of enhancing the Tiana Bay ecosystem, but to try and minimize repetitive flood damage. As was indicated by the applicant, I have no significant concerns with regards to the scope of the project plans, or with regards to the intended structural improvements. However, as mentioned, I do have concerns regarding the planned placement of soil in order to elevate the swimming pool and deck or patio area. That plan runs counter to the policies and standards that I hold property owners to get for the purposes of administrative wetland permits that are issued to properties that are within flood zones or partially in flood zones. Typically, I only allow for grade changes and fill deposition for the purpose of the septic system if required by the Suffolk County Department of Health Services. I'm going to hand out a overlay of the flood zone. And while consistent with the applicant's presentation, the residence and the planned pool is landward of the limit of moderate wave action. It still lies mostly within a restricted flood zone. The second drawing that I'll hand out is one showing the existing topography. And what you're seeing on the map is gradually ascending grade, which is consistent with the grades and elevations on the abutting properties to the south. As indicated, typically I look to prohibit the placement of fill in flood zones, as any fill deposition or grade changes in a flood zone reduces the floodplain water storage capacity. It can divert floodwaters during significant nor'easters and hurricanes onto other proximate properties that are also in the flood zones. And it can increase risk of flood damage to neighboring properties. Consistent with recommendations that I often make, and acknowledging the applicant's desire to have an elevated pool and deck that flows or connects with the existing large residential deck. I have recommended that the pool be elevated on pilings, and that the deck or patio be structurally elevated as well. And I'll just show you an example of what I have in mind. These are photos of a property on Shore Road in Remsenburg, where the pool has been elevated on pilings, and the deck is also structurally elevated. It's becoming fairly it's becoming fairly commonplace to structurally elevate patios. And what I wanted to share with you tonight, but unfortunately it looks like I don't have that plan, is a recent plan that I approved for a property in Bridgehampton, where we had very similar descending grades. And in order to negate the need for fill, I asked that the large patio be installed on pilings, which the applicant has agreed to. And one of many reasons the applicant was amenable to that was not only because it would negate the need to bring in large quantities of soil, but there was also an opportunity to create a storage area under the elevated pool and patio for the pool equipment, kayaks, dry wells, Coltec chambers, and other uses. What I wanted to hand out next is a sketch that I got from the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, which shows the potential impacts that placement of fill can have in flood zones.
Thank you, Tom. Sorry, I nodded off.
Should be a couple extra copies there as well.
No, it's in the file, too.
So what these sketches are intending to portray is a flood zone area, an AE flood zone, and this property is in FEMA AE flood zone. It's showing the natural grades, and then it's showing a proposed building and planned fill within a portion of that flood zone. And what it depicts is that that fill placement displaces water and can cause an increase in the level of flooding in other areas in the flood zone. So what I'm recommending is, in the event that the applicant is not amenable to structurally elevate the pool and deck or patio without the use of fill, that the applicant look to mitigate the loss of floodplain water storage capacity that would result from the placement of about 30 cubic yards. The way that's done, as shown on this sketch, is that you would look to calculate the cubic yards of floodplain water storage capacity that is lost as a result of the placement of soil fill in the flood zone. And you would offset that by creating some additional area flood storage capacity proximate to the construction, so that your project is not resulting in significant impacts to the flood zone. This, although this is not a present requirement in this town, and is a requirement in many other municipalities, offsetting the loss of floodplain water storage capacity by creating an additional area that can retain water, that would not only be consistent with the goal of minimizing adverse impacts to wetlands, inclusive of natural flooding and drainage patterns, but it would also be consistent with section 169-2 of the town code, which is flood damage prevention section. That section of the code notes that fill and alteration of flood plains, including construction of barriers, may increase flood damages, unnaturally divert flood waters, and increase flood hazards to the land. This is a second option for the applicant, is if the applicant is not amenable to structural elevation of the pool and deck or patio. The applicant can look to offset the loss of floodplain storage capacity elsewhere on the property. These areas are, the area where the reclamation is done, of course, it has to be an area that's hydraulically connected to the existing floodplain. It needs to create additional capacity beyond the current floodplain capacity. So in the interest of minimizing potential adverse environmental impacts, particularly negative effects on floodplain water storage and natural flooding and drainage patterns, as indicated in the interest, in the event that the applicant yet wants to go forward with using soil that apparently would be taken from areas landward of the flood zone to elevate this area of the pool and patio. I would ask that as part of their buffer restoration plan, or as part of their plans for the remainder of the property, that they calculate the cubic yards of flood storage capacity that would be lost, and they mitigate that elsewhere on the property. Thank you.
Marty, I have a question. What's different about the pool that was approved already versus this one, that you're recommending the pilings and you didn't recommend the pilings the last approval?
The pool is slightly different.
In what way?
One of the, one of the things that, happens here is over time, you get a better understanding of how natural systems work, of how natural floodplains work. you get an opportunity to see what areas are especially vulnerable to flooding, and you live and learn. And while again, not looking for the structural envelopes to change, I'm just looking for some minimal additional mitigation in order to offset impacts. I don't think that the mitigation that asking for would place excessive burdens on the landowner. Just looking to do what we can to maintain the natural floodplain system. You can see that the abutting property to the south, and you'll notice a pool there. That pool was actually built in 1988, which of course was prior to the town wetland law. But if you fill a portion of the flood zone on the subject property, when those waters come in from Tiana Bay, they are going to be diverted somewhat onto the abutting property. And although some may look at the impacts of 30 cubic yards of fill in a floodplain as being minimal compared to the acreage of the larger floodplain system, I would offer that when you allow for unnecessary fill in the floodplain, you're setting a precedence, thereby running the risk of additional applicants coming in and looking to fill portions of the floodplain, the cumulative impacts of which can be very significant, particularly in an area like Tiana Bay that has a history, a very recent history of flood damage. Thank you.
Would you mind if I ask some questions, or would you rather speak first and I'll ask later?
The only thing, excuse me, the only thing that I have to say is that the location of this retaining wall is more than 100 feet from the wetland boundary, and there is nothing to say that the proposed addition could not be in the location of the swimming pool. And if it were, it would just need to meet FEMA requirements, which would be base flood elevation +2 for living space. So this is an AE9 flood zone. So if it was to be living space, it would have to be a first floor elevation of 11 to meet FEMA. And it could be a foundation. It doesn't need to be pilings. It could be a regular block foundation. So to me, there's really no difference between an addition to the house or this swimming pool. My client has every right to come in and ask for that addition, and it meets the wetland setbacks, and this board would likely be inclined to grant them that addition. The retaining wall and pool are similar in nature and in size to what was previously granted and was still valid when I applied for this application. So I just find it to be odd that it's not suddenly acceptable. That's all. That's all I have to say.
Well, I tried to get to the whereabouts of the highest level of water that's ever been noted on this particular property. I was wondering if there was any way we could get that information.
I don't know if I'm allowed to speak.
Not
Absolutely.
from there, but when you're ready, you can come to the podium.
You could answer that when you'd like me to answer.
You can come up now if you have the answer to the question. That's what we're looking for.
If you could state your name and address, please.
Sure. Anthony Prudenti,
I'm the owner of the subject property. I've owned it for about 2 years now and have become friendly with the neighbors and have talked to them in depth about the history of the property. It's been an exciting history, but I'm glad that I own it now and can make it not an eyesore anymore. The neighbors have informed me, because that was one of my first questions, of course, how high the floodwaters came up during Sandy, and they let me know that all of them separately, that it did not come up or into the house or the property or the basement. I could get that information from them if you'd like, but I'm talking about the neighbors that are immediately adjacent to me, 2 houses over, again, adjacent on the waterfront, and also the property directly across the street. They're all familiar with this plan, this project, this board hearing. None of them have any opposition. In fact, the immediate neighbor with the swimming pool that you see there is happy that we've relocated the pool to a position further away from the property line, such that if there was floodwater, it would not divert as much as it possibly could have with the previously approved design. That previously approved pool is extending towards their property. We've tucked it in and kept it tight to the house. So yes, there is a slight difference in position, but it's less impactful of potential floodwater that would be, with the old design, diverted to their property. So they're happy with the new design that we've moved it away. But yes, to answer your first question, I'm sorry that I'm gone on. They've indicated to me that Sandy floodwater did not come into the house or the basement, according to my neighbors who were there.
All right, as long as you're there, from looking at the survey, it seems to me, hope I'm reading it correctly, that the pool and that deck are separated from the house.
It's connected with decking.
To the house?
The existing, maybe you're looking at the previous approval, where it's
That's the
offset at
previous
an angle?
approval.
This is
That's
the
the
previous approval?
Yeah, that is the old one, where it's kind of
Yes.
pushed out to the property next door. We've tucked it in and made it right up next to the house, keeping it as tight to the house as possible.
Okay, my question
Yes.
is this. Is there a possibility to move the pool further northeast, I guess, is the,
Look at what, that's where it is now. Do you have a,
That's a June.
That's what I.
this is the.
oh, I see, all right, they turned it, okay.
And they,
It's
it was
just a-
over here, they pulled it right to the house.
Okay, just the flood, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
The floor plan that I submitted shows you the orientation of the pool that we're proposing, but it also shows you that it's a step down from the existing decking. It's about 2 feet lower than the existing deck.
Okay,
It looks like it's less. Looks like there's less sticking out here in the floodplain than,
is this the floodplain line,
um,
or is this, what is this line, wait a minute?
There's the floodplain line goes through the house, through the lower portion
this
of
is
the
Zone
residence.
X and Zone AE, elevation 9.
And then going through
So
the
this is the
shed
flood line.
Yeah,
relocation and through the, what's allowed to become lawn, is the limit of moderate wave action. Actually, the steps, to the proposed patio are just, landward of the limit.
What's going under the area that says roof over?
That's an existing deck,
So you're putting a roof over the deck,
a portion of it, yes.
and the deck is on the ground level?
No, the deck is elevated. I handed out some photos, and you can see that that deck is elevated probably about 8 feet above grade,
Okay.
and
you wanna-
there's nothing underneath it.
So the pool is not gonna be that high?
No, the pool will be about 5 feet or so, 5 feet above grade at the maximum end, but the grade slopes up, which is hard to portray in photos. But you can see the topography lines on the survey. So at the limit of moderate wave action, the topography is between 6 and 7. And at the top end of the pool, it's more than 8.
So, all right, my original idea is move, unless there would be any consideration moving that pool to this, to the, what would it be, northeast? Further up, further towards the front of the house?
To meet a certain requirement, that's not in your code at this point, I mean.
I'm just trying to, I'm trying to
What, are you gonna move
get
it
a
to where the-
ground here
move
where
it
we
to where the
can,
addition is?
you wanna,
You're moving it to where the addition is?
Marty, isn't there, and it's not showing on any of these maps, but as you look out in Tiana Bay, isn't there a strip of land, I don't know what you would call that, that breaks the water coming in? Okay, you're
Yes.
shaking.
Yeah, yes.
I'm very familiar with that area.
Thank
So
you.
you really don't have to worry about any wave action.
No.
And that also breaks anything that's coming in from the southwest.
Yes.
The nor'easters don't affect you, they affect the other side
Absolutely.
of the bay.
Yes.
So, I think a lot of this is mute, and I think what you're recommending, Marty, that's very valid, but I don't think it's necessary for this piece of property. I think it's necessary for others, and they're still going to have to get okays from the building department. So,
Can I address that question?
you know, so, so far, I don't have a problem with what they're proposing, and the fill is coming from the land, it's not coming from outside.
Can I, Marty, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town, the issue is not wave action, the issue is flooding. This, the upper portion of Tiana Bay experiences very significant flooding. All of those properties that front on Tiana Bay there get a lot of flooding. One of our goals here is to do what we can, work with landowners to design their improvements so that they minimize adverse impacts to the environment. I look to, whenever I can, give the landowner what they want in terms of coverage, in terms of uses, but see if those improvements can be designed better to minimize environmental impacts. The comments that were made about possibly shifting the pool are interesting because there might actually be an opportunity to reorient the direction of the pool, shift it a little bit further landward and get the majority of that pool outside of the flood zone. So the landowner may want to look at that as well. One of the benefits of structurally elevating the pool and deck is that you could actually elevate it higher without additional impacts, so that it flows into and connects well with the existing deck. So when you come out of the rear of the house, you're walking out on the main deck, and you can walk right over to the pool and dip in the pool, rather than having to go down steps to a lower level. So I think it actually works out better to structurally elevate those improvements so that they can connect at the same level with that existing large deck. And it can, as indicated by those photos, it can be done in a way that aesthetically looks great. It only enhances the views from that pool deck of Tiana Bay and the surrounding area. Yes, construction methods are different, but I think it would actually have a lot of benefits for the landowner. I also wanted to say that the comment was made, well, there's no difference between this and if the landowner had proposed a residential living area addition in this area. There is a difference. This property doesn't have a pool at present, and a pool is a luxury. it's an amenity. So we look at accessory improvements, amenities such as pools, differently than we look at the home itself. We're a little bit more restrictive in terms of what standards have to be abided by, and what practicable alternatives need to be looked at in the interest of minimizing adverse impacts. As I indicated earlier on, I have many applicants now who are structurally elevating their patios and decks and pools as a means to minimize impacts to floodwaters, to floodplains, and to avoid alteration of natural flood and drainage patterns. What you want to happen here is you want the floodwaters to gradually come in under these improvements and then recede naturally. It doesn't make any, it neither makes any sense, nor is it necessary to alter this floodplain for the purposes of pool construction. So I would say that one of the charges of this board is to ensure that floodplains are not adversely impacted, to ensure that their water storage capacity is not negatively affected, and to do whatever you can to ensure that projects that are approved are not impacting wetland and buffering flooding and drainage patterns. I don't think I'm asking for a lot on part of the applicant. I'm looking to give him exactly what he wants. I'm just asking that it be designed a little bit differently to further minimize impacts. Thank you.
So we need to make a decision. Any other questions before I wrap up?
I just wanted to ask one thing. It was mentioned that recently this area has been flooded a lot. Is that because of Sandy and Irene? Or is that happening constantly every time we have a heavy rain?
It could, actually.
No, it's just a very wet lowland area. I'm not, it doesn't appear that Superstorm Sandy changed the terrain significantly. You know, with global warming and climate change, we are experiencing the effects of global rise in sea level, and that's evidenced by changes in flood regimes, especially in these in the higher portions of tributaries. While I did not ask that the applicant make any adjustments to the former wetland boundary for the purposes of proceeding with this application, you do notice in that area there's this very gradual transition going on where you're getting more and more wetland vegetation higher up in the watershed and higher up in the waterplain. I live very close to East Tiana Road, so I go down East Tiana Road all the time. So I see that those lowlands get flooded a lot. So that the flood water storage capacity is very important. We need to do what we can to maintain and protect that in order to ensure that landowners are not adversely impacted. So what I'm asking for, because we're only looking at 30 cubic yards of fill, in order to offset that loss of storage capacity, it would just simply require that another portion of the property higher up in the flood zone be cut and set at a slightly lower level. And there may be an opportunity to do that on the north side, just so that you're providing the same amount of flood storage capacity that you're losing by placing fill in another portion of the flood zone. Thank you.
Just to further my question and to piggyback on Ann, I understand how things are looked at differently, different at a point in time, but I don't see a difference in the location or design of the pool that would warrant ramping up the design or mitigation requirements for this application from what was already approved. So I'm actually fine with it, just personally. Seems like you and I both agree.
To address some of the question about recent flooding, my client, I also have a client, 2 doors down from here to the south, and I did come before this board with an application for him, and he does have a pool in an elevated patio with retaining walls. And I don't know if maybe that aerial can be brought out a tiny bit, Karina? Is that possible? Yeah, so you can see his pool there to the south,
I
2
think
doors
you gotta
down.
bring it out a little bit further.
Yeah,
That's it.
oops,
Not that far.
oh boy.
Way too far.
I don't know where we went there. Yeah, so just there to the south.
I think it's,
And he
2
sends me
lots there.
photos periodically because he'll show me how far the water has come up. And the water has never reached his pool, which is, I guess it's about in keeping with the person in between them's seaward edge. It may be a little closer to the wetlands because of just the way that the wetland edge goes there. But the elevation there is fairly low. The town did just purchase the property to the south of his property and remove the residence that's there. So floodwaters can be diverted into that lot as well. But he's constantly sending me photos that it goes probably to the beginning of that number that's in his property on an extreme high tide. So if you were to kind of take that arc, I don't know that the floodwaters reach that hedge line that's on the Prudenti property. Those hedges are not in great shape, but they're not quite totally dead. So,
Well, if you drew the arc across, it almost looked like it would meet up with where that shed actually is, so can you use that as a point of reference for where the water actually rises up to?
yeah, I think there is a
'Cause
rack
it's land-
line
It's landward of
that is just behind the shed.
Beyond, water, it doesn't come landward.
Have to hear it.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yes, in my existence of the home, plus the neighbor's insight, it has not come landward of that shed. The water
Okay.
stays seaward.
Okay.
I mean, in an extreme storm event, who knows, but
But it's being moved anyway, and everything is landward
Right.
of that. I'm just curious as a comparison line.
All right, I want to wrap this up.
Yeah, let's wrap it
I
up.
just wanted to just make a few very quick comments.
I cannot
To
imagine
any
anything.
further response
gonna
to
change anything that we're already
statement
talking
that was
about?
made.
I'm not looking for more arguments about
But
it.
it's
I wanna wrap it up.
not speaking
Do you have
about-
more environmental issues to come before the board?
Yes. Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. In response to the question as to why changing my recommendations and asking for additional mitigation. I spent a lot of time in the last 2 years working with the Department of State to update the Comprehensive Conservation and Management Plan for the Long Island South Shore Estuary Reserve, which takes in Deanna Bay and all the interconnected bays from Southampton to Nassau County. And one of the reasons we updated it was because we recognized the need to better address coastal resiliency. And a lot of recommendations came out of that update that advised local municipalities to do a better job of looking at floodplain impacts in the interest of addressing climate change, rise in sea level, changes in tidal regimes, and to reduce the potential for repetitive flood damage. So we have been asked through that management plan to integrate coastal resiliency needs into land use planning. Thank you.
So we've just spent 55 minutes on this application over 30 cubic yards, and I've said before, we tend to major in the minors and minor in the majors. We have just done that again. But we've heard a lot of information about floodplains, about the pool, about the previous application, about the particular site specific issues here affecting wave action, and also understanding where the water floods, where the water comes in. Now, Tanner Bay is tidal. With a tidal body of water such as Tanner Bay along the south shore of Long Island, there's an inlet, so the source is, for all practical purposes, unlimited. So the water will rise not according to how much excavation there is, but how much elevation there is. So the elevation will drive where the water goes. I'm not at all comfortable excavating in a way that changes the topography to move it away from a gentle slope. A gentle slope in these properties is absolutely key for allowing the water to drain away after a storm event. And I don't think we want to get caught into the thinking that if we were to do some creative excavation between the house and Tanner Bay, we would in any way reduce the flood impacts of neighboring properties, because it just doesn't work. What we have here is, what I'm hearing from the board members is you're okay with the plan as presented by the applicant. I'm okay with it too, because I don't see that we're gonna do anything here that's going to change the flooding on neighboring properties. It is important to pay attention to the floodplain, but the best way to help flooding is to move the house, not just this, but all houses, into higher elevations, and leave the lower elevations alone. So with that, is there any reason to keep this public hearing open? You ready to, you okay with it being closed?
Anyone else want to speak?
Is there anyone in the public who wants to speak in this application?
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you. For the ZBA, Jim Lynn Realty Inc.
You're all in.
Marty Shea, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. It's a pending variance application for a property that's being brought for this board at 47 Alien Avenue in Hampton Bays. We had issued a permit allowing for various living area additions. That increase in coverage requires a zoning variance. So just two brief comments are made. First is that the living area additions for which variants are being sought, which are depicted on this survey, as prepared by Angelo Joseph Cecere, dated May 18, 2020, last revised June 29, 2022, have already been authorized pursuant to Conservation Board Wetland Permit Number CB 22036, which was issued on September 13, 2022. And second, said approval was conditioned upon establishment of a restored covenanted naturally vegetated wetland, non-disturbance, non-fertilization buffer.
Motion to send those comments to the zoning board of appeals.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The administrative wetland permits are in your packets. And we'll move on to the resolution of conditional approval. A 170332, Nicola Caputo. Any discussion?
Move to issue.
Second?
Resolved that a conditional wetland permit approval granted to Nicola Caputo for the proposed project on the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 022012, Duretti Fufa. Any discussion?
Move to issue.
Second.
Resolved that a conditional wetland permit approval granted to Duretti Fufa for the proposed project on the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 023001, David Warren and Luciana Papalone. Any discussion?
Move to issue.
Second?
Resolved that a conditional wetland permit approval granted to David Warren and Luciana Pampalone for the proposed project on the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 023020, Fabienne Terwing. Any discussion?
Move to issue.
Second?
Resolved that a conditional permit approval be granted to Fabienne Terwing for the proposed project on the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? A 023031, 69 Little Neck LLC. Any discussion?
Move to issue.
Second?
Resolved that a conditional wetland permit be granted to 69 Little Neck LLC for the proposed project on the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Preliminary review signature determination, A 022082, Erlinda Bildner, the it's postponed to September 13th.
Motion to postpone to September 13th, 2023.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 023009, Ellen Rubin.
Marty, Chief Environmental Analyst for the town. This application relates to an existing residentially developed property in Noyak that benefits from having a cottage and a pool and patio area. There is a preliminary advisory report on file dated August 21, 2023. The property is marked by lowlands in the rear yard that are freshwater wetlands. I have asked the applicant to preserve that area of wetlands and to come forward with a covenanted naturally vegetated wetland non-disturbance, non-fertilization buffer, as well as to upgrade the sanitary system to an IAOWTS to address the increase in living area. The applicant has agreed to all my recommendations and has come forward with an excellent buffer restoration plan and is ready to draft the necessary covenants as soon as they get conditional approval. That being said, is an application for which we have sufficient information to make a determination. Accordingly, I'm recommending that the public hearing requirement be waived.
Motion to waive the public hearing?
Second?
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby waives the public hearing requirement pursuant to Chapter 325, Section 3-8E of the Town Code. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 023020, no, wait a minute.
Two.
Move down a notch.
Nope.
A 023022, Guillaume Savadier, postponed to September 13th.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 023038, 34 Jagger LLC. This is for the address 34 Jagger Lane, West Hampton.
Okay, this application relates to a vacant lot on the east side of Jagger Lane that's adjacent to town and state regulated wooded freshwater wetlands that are part of a larger tributary system to the Merchants Bay. The application was made in order to gain this board's approval to develop the property with residence, garage, patio, pool house, and other improvements. Consistent with my recommendations, the applicant had modified the plans to make sure they're compliant with all the requirements as per code in terms of the wetland construction buffer setbacks for vacant land. Accordingly, we do have sufficient information to make a determination, and I'm recommending that the hearing requirement be waived.
Motion to waive the public hearing?
Second.
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby waives the public hearing requirement pursuant to Chapter 325, Section 325-8 of the Town Code. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 023039 34 Jagger LLC. This is
This
436 Jagger Lane.
this application relates to a developed property abutting the former property that also is adjacent to town and state regulated freshwater wetlands. The home is in disrepair and uninhabitable. The applicant is looking to renovate that home. The property benefits from a barn that's being utilized as garage. The applicant wants to renovate the structure and add a pool house as well as install a pool and patio. All of the improvements which are being proposed at this property would be consistent with the code requirements in that they would provide the necessary covenanted buffer through a conservation easement, and all of the required wetland building setbacks are being met. We do have sufficient information to make a determination. As such, I'm recommending that the hearing requirement be waived.
Motion to waive the public hearing?
Second.
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby waives the public hearing requirement pursuant to Chapter 325, Section 325-8 of the Town Code. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 023044 Bayberry Holding LLC.
This application relates to a residence that has been in disrepair and uninhabitable for many years as a consequence of a significant fire that occurred at the site. The remaining home is weathered, it's deteriorated, the deck is collapsing. While the current landowner has no plans for redevelopment at this time, they are seeking this board's approval in order to demolish and remove all the improvements, not only the main residence, but also the detached garage. There is a preliminary advisory report on file dated August 21, 2023, that recommends that the septic system be abandoned as well, that the applicant install silt fence and project limiting fence around the immediate periphery of the residence before demolition in order to minimize any cutting or disturbance of natural vegetation. Landowner has an interest in coming forward with a more conforming development plan for this site, so I look forward to the future application. This is an area where we're seeing a change in the tidal regimes, in that the tides are coming further into the land, so more of the land is transitioning to wetlands. So it makes sense to demolish this home and to come in with plans for an entirely new residence set further back on the property. We do have sufficient information to make a determination. As such, recommending that the hearing requirement be waived.
Motion to waive the public hearing?
Second.
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby waives the public hearing requirement pursuant to Chapter 325, Section 325-80 of the Town Code. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All in favor? Anybody opposed? you're opposed, you can stay.
Yeah.
You don't,